Welcome to Graced2Care. Take a breath, pull up a chair, little laugh, little truth to share. We're Graced2Care. Together for the ones who hold it off through the late calls.
Welcome to Graced2Care. I'm Ferne Sapp.
And I'm Jessica Banner, and we're here having conversations on the grief, grit, and gift of caregiving.
Reminding you that in caregiving, you're never meant to walk alone because we are
Graced2Care.
Well, listen, we're super excited, and we want to just ask you, have you found yourself in this place in life where sometimes you just didn't prepare for what was ahead? Something that was just not on your calendar. I mean, you just didn't schedule it in. You didn't pencil it in. Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about those seasons that you did not plan for. But before we get started, we've got a little bit of celebrating to do. In fact, I brought some flowers on the set because it is your birthday. Happy birthday, Jessica.
Yeah.
So what did you do? I mean, did you enjoy your birthday? Tell us about it.
I did. We celebrated, just had time with family and friends.
Wow.
It's a good time.
Good time. Good time. Birthdays are always super special.
They are. And it, I'm glad we celebrated because I think that's a good thing for our community to remember, that it is so important to remember the celebrations.
Yeah.
When you're caregiving.
It is. It is. Especially when you're caregiving, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, today, we all have a calendar, right? And so the calendar said it was your birthday. So we got a chance to celebrate Jess's birthday. But we all have a calendar where we write down those things that are really important to us, things that we want to make sure that we don't forget. And I will guarantee you, if we took a survey out there of all the caregivers, all the 200 million, right, plus, I guarantee you that none of us have ever scheduled in, on this date, I'm going to be a caregiver.
Yeah, absolutely. Very few plan to do that. And, we all have seasons of life. And, when we can think about winter, fall, spring, summer, we usually have expectations about what that looks like, what we expect. Even when we describe that, not just as the literal seasons, we kind of think about that in the way life happens sometimes. But caregiving is an unexpected season, right? It's sort of a disruptive season. And I think you and I were talking off camera, and it was like, I told you, it kind of feels more like a fall or a winter that you didn't expect, and it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It really is. And the thing with that is that sometimes when you're already packed up, and let's just say you're packed up for the spring season of your life, right? You've got all spring things, and that's what you want to wear. And now winter has come. Things have just changed. Having that change or having to make that change can be very abrupt. And so on today, we want to talk about how we all go through various seasons in our lives. But here's the thing. We all have an opportunity to decide whether or not we're going to accept the season that we're in, or we're going to reject it. Whether or not we're going to accept it or we're going to fight it. I mean, if you think about it right now, if it rained outside, there's nothing that we can do about the rain. We're either going to decide that we're going to go out and enjoy the rain, or we're going to stay in the house. And so that's where we come at in caregiving. When we enter the season, we have to make a decision whether or not we're going to accept it or reject it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all remember. We may not remember the exact moment because it may have happened differently for each of us, but I think we all remember the exact moment we had where there was this realization of, I have a new reality. This season has changed. Right?
Yeah.
What we came to notice was that life started to require something a little bit different. Right? And so I know for me, like, different meant I wasn't socializing as much because I was in my 30s and I had to adjust career planning and things like that. So different.
Yeah, very different. We have to make that decision whether or not we're going to embrace it. And I remember when I started on this journey of caregiving, I realized that there was this unbearable grief that I was really putting myself through. And it was all because I did not want to embrace the season. I was thinking in my mind, okay, no problem that, you're not feeling well. That's fine. We can deal with you're not feeling well today.
Right.
But I had no idea that this was going to continue on. And so it was just an unbearable place of grief that I put myself through.
Absolutely. And when we talk about that tension when coming alongside, I've witnessed a lot as a caregiver, as a counselor who's come alongside caregivers. There really is, you can get caught in this place where you can accept the task, but have you embraced almost the assignment of it, right? Like, you experience it differently when you just do a task. Some people can outright reject it if they've been asked to do it, but we all can end up in that space where, am I going to take on the task or am I going to embrace this as a part of my life and that I am now partnered with somebody else and our lives are now merged in a new way?
Yeah. You know, asking ourselves this question, whether or not I'm embracing it or rejecting it, is really a spot of vulnerability. It's a place of being honest because we all want to feel like, oh, yes, I'll take care of this person. I know for me, the first space of care came with my husband. And so we all have these vows, right? In sickness and in health, right? To death do us part. And for some reason, we get in our mind that, I know I had in my mind, there'd never be any sickness and health, right? We'd always have health and no sickness. But then when the sickness arrives, it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this moment? And I had to just be very honest with myself. And I think that's one of the things we have to talk about, Jessica, and that is the opportunity to be honest with ourselves.
Absolutely. And to do that through the lens of grace, you know, because being honest with yourself is just telling yourself the truth. It's acknowledging where are the disappointments, where are the unmet expectations, right? What did I expect to be of this season? What did I want? You may have just the grief of what's actually going on. And so it's really important to be honest with yourself. And that may include that I need to reach out to a supportive person, right? Because there's a lot to process when there's those kinds of changes and those kinds of losses, even just in our expectations. We may even have to process a little bit with a pastor, a counselor, a mentor, a coach, just even a good friend sometimes, you know, just so that we can, one, let those feelings come up and come out. But two, we may need to process because we may be in different places with, you know, what if I came into caregiving and I wasn't actually getting along with that person when I stepped into that season? Or what if there were some unresolved things? And caregiving requires really open conversation with your care receiver. And so you may just need a place to be honest with, are any of those things coming up that may be keeping me in that fight versus rejection versus embrace?
Yeah. I love that you talk about resources because I know that one of the things that was very real for me is that I was in a space, in a place where I wanted to leave my marriage. And it was before I actually knew that we were going to enter the season of illness. And so I had pretty much prepared myself for, you know, this is the end, right? This is where we end at. Everybody's adult now. We've got everyone out of the house. And so now sickness, you know, shows up. And so I think it's important that you do tap into other resources and have some real conversations. In fact, if you go to our website, which is www.graced2care.com, you'll see it there in our lower thirds. But if you go to our website, you get an opportunity to see some of those resources because we understand sometimes it's about having conversations. And here's the thing, Jessica, many times when we're talking about conversing with the caregiver, the person you're giving the care to, the recipient, that person may not be verbal. Right? So it may not be someone that you can talk to about what you're getting ready to go through. And that's why it's important to have the resources and to know here we're offering a community, community. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's important to be graceful with yourself. I know I said that a minute ago to be in grace, but you didn't expect this.
Yeah.
And you didn't expect these shifts and that you'd be having these losses. And it's okay to be angry or disappointed or even have some resentment. You just need a place to get what you need to handle those things. And it's okay to also celebrate because some people are in some places where even though there's loss, they may be celebrating in this season, you know, the time that they've got. And so just to be present and be graceful with yourself. And as we do that, we kind of want to get into talking about what is the progression that comes after the initial call. Because we've talked some now about the initial call, but let's talk about the progression in this season. So the progression of the season, the overarching shift of the season in caregiving, that was that initial call. But we talked some about how it never really stops changing once you enter caregiving, because medications change, seeing different doctors may change, and somebody's needs may change. And so that is progressing through the season. Even the impact to your personal life may change. You know, you might have been able to work in the beginning, but then you had to make some work adjustments, right? I know, for me in the beginning, I could do a little bit more, but as things got more serious, I got more nervous to leave the home because I was providing a lot of hands-on care in some ways. And so those changes happen. It progresses, and humans don't love change.
We absolutely do not love change. I mean, it's just a part of human nature. Change is one of the things we don't want to go through. And sometimes it can even require a change with your finances. I know for us, it was a drastic shift. You imagine this, and you all understand this because many of you are experiencing that. And this is the reason why we want to have the honest conversations, to know you're not alone and there's help, right? There's places that we can go to get the resources. And here's the thing. I think about when we had to move from me taking care of both my mother-in-law as well as also having my husband. Our household finances shifted. Imagine now going to an extra $3,000 to $5,000 coming out of your household every single month. I mean, those are things that, you know, they hurt, and they're things that, you know, kind of cause a change or a shift in your season. And that's why it's important that we know where to go, because as we begin to move in that season, I was like, okay, what do we do about this? Well, I found out that there are resources out there, that there are some places that you can tap into. And one of the things that we're going to do inside of some of our segments is to bring people in so we could talk about what happens in your city, what happens in your state, what's out there that's available to you, so that you can bring in something that supplements or helps to take care of some of those expenses, because that's a serious shift in your season.
Absolutely. Because some of those shifts also include physical, mental, emotional. You know, someone may require a lot of physical care, and that's physical taxation on your own body too. And so, and caregivers can be a little bit guilty of letting their own doctor's appointments slide and things like that, because they get in that mindset of, I've got someone else to take care of. So it's important stuff. Yeah.
Here's something that we wrote down because it was just, you know, part of a conversation we're having. And it was the mere fact that seasons don't ask permission.
They don't.
Seasons don't ask for permission, right? They arrive, they show up at your door, whether you're ready for them or not, whether you feel like it or not. They don't ask for permission, but we have to be willing to adapt.
Right.
I want us to really talk about, you know, just how to move through some of the seasons, because of course, you know, there's this place of learning.
Right.
So I think about the season that I was in when we were learning. The reason why I think it's important that we talk about them is because when you understand where you're at, then you understand what to do about where you're at.
Right.
So I think about, you know, when I was in the learning season, this is where just something very practical, something very simple, like learning which medications needed to be taken when. I remember being on the phone one day with my mother, and I had like a breakdown because I realized that I was giving to my husband the medications in the wrong space. And everything was just off. And she asked me, do you write them down? Right? Do you write them down? And so I began to now create this chart. That was a part of my learning. So now he has a medication chart. And here's what I was able to know, Jessica. Do you know that you can take that chart and those medications up to your local pharmacist, and that they will have the PharmD there to help you to understand? One of the things that she said immediately was, this medication doesn't need to be taken within 2 hours of another. That was a learning season. But as I began to learn, it began to make things better. And so we have to understand it's okay to be in a season of learning, but when you can understand it, you know where to go to get what you need.
Yeah. You know, and I think part of that learning too is advocating, you know, that's a process.
Yes.
It's enough for us to learn to advocate for ourselves, but and it's different even when you're a parent to a child advocating, but when you're learning to advocate for another adult, that's a learning process. And caregiving isn't about being something new.
Yeah.
right? It's about discovering how much you can adjust and still be yourself.
Yeah.
Because you are taking in a lot of new skills. I remember learning oxygen tanks and concentrators and medication shifts all the time, medical equipment. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to learn, but you don't have to lose yourself either in that season.
Yeah.
You just make room.
Yeah.
Make room for the learning.
Yeah, that's it. Make room for the learning. Make room for the learning. And that's what we say about that season. Because sometimes we move from learning seasons to long seasons.
It's true.
To long seasons, when you wonder, when is this going to end, right? How many more days do we have of this? How many more days do we have to stay up or to get up in the middle of the night and to deal with whatever the crisis is or whatever's happening? Maybe that person, I know in our case, we had a change in diagnoses. So we went from one stage where we were dealing with Parkinson's to another stage where we were dealing with stage 4, cancer that had metastasized to his bones. So these are times when seasons can be long and you wonder, how long? What do we do during this? How do we endure the season?
Well, that's just it. The long season is the endurance season, right? That's the place where it's hard because we don't have a clear date.
Yeah.
Typically in caregiving, you don't know your exact end date. You may have some situations where you had surgery and you knew there's about a 3-month recovery, but typically for long-term caregiving, there are no dates. It's not clear. You don't know if this is going to be a couple days, a few weeks, months, years, and so what does it look like to settle into that? And you wake up not knowing if it's going to be easier, harder, or just different today. So you kind of have to create this mindset of what's my norm today? You kind of wake up going, how can I take on today? Open to whatever it may bring. Right.
Yeah. And even recognizing during that time period, and you can speak on this as a counselor, but during that time period, understanding how your body's responding and knowing what's happening, knowing what's going on. Sometimes you go through this place where the stress is just, inevitable. I remember having to go through a space where my body just hurt. I hurt all over and I didn't want to get up. And when I went to my own doctor, he says, no, the issue, well, she told me this before I went to the other doctor, but she could look at me and she could see my body was off. And she says, your body's off. I'm going to send you, right, to figure out what's going on. And after coming out of MRIs and all the other deal, we realized that my body had physically shifted. And so that stress on your body, we talked about having this compassion fatigue where, you come into this space where I started feeling guilty, like, oh my goodness, is it okay for me to feel like I don't want to do this anymore?
Right.
Because you're just physically drained. And I know you can speak to that because compassion fatigue sometimes looks like stress or, this meltdown. But in reality, you're going through an entirely different phase or season within a season.
Well, as a counselor, we talk a lot about compassion fatigue, but you have burnout, which is just the exhaustion. Yeah. It's the mental, the emotional taxation. It's the wear and tear on your body. Yeah. You may not have gotten enough rest, those kinds of things, and you just feel really burned out. But compassion fatigue is almost like leveling up from there. Yeah. Right? Burnout can last for a little bit. You can get recharged, jump back in the game, but compassion fatigue can feel a little scarier. And you're right, it sets us up to sometimes feel kind of guilty. Yeah. Because compassion fatigue is where I start to get on top of burnout. You may experience those things of burnout, but you may start to feel desensitized to what you're experiencing. And that affects how we show up for ourselves and for our care receivers. Because if we get into such a monotony, or it can feel like apathy, and our motivation can just disappear. Right? Yes. And how do we manage compassion fatigue? I told somebody the other day, I said, there are bottles and bottles of tears in heaven from the nights I cried, in caregiving. And there were nights, I don't know if bone tired, but that's what I feel when I feel tired all the way to my bones. And I just remember having nights where I would just go to bed and just pray, like, Lord, just help me get up tomorrow with a fresh perspective so I can love well. I can care well. That I don't carry my burnout, my resentment, any of these things into tomorrow. And and he gave it to me, right? But those seasons, they come. That happens in the grit, the long season.
The long season happens inside of the grit. And here's the thing is, it can play on that space of guilt that we talked about. But it's important to understand when you have compassion fatigue, it doesn't mean that you don't care about the person.
Right.
It just means that you've been in a season for so long, in a space for so long, without having that break or without having that relief. One of the things that I found that was very helpful was to start reaching out to other agencies that could help. And so now you can bring in, right? And you can have people to come in to help with certain things. And listen, I can just be honest with you to tell you that there were some things that were not cheap, they cost, but there were others in which we were able to find other programs and other agencies where we could bring in someone and help to lift some of that burden. Because the reality is that we will, in caregiving, endure some very long seasons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I always say this, and we put this down. The long season is where we can learn two things, right? We can learn that two things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
You can love the person deeply and dearly, and you can also be exhausted from what you're going through.
Yes.
And both can be true. It just means that we have to learn how to endure and how to work in the season that we're in.
And a lot of times that means asking for help.
Yes.
Getting connected to your community.
Yes. Getting connected. We talk about, the learning season when we're learning some things. We talk about the long season when you're dealing with the grit of it all. But there's also this season that's lasting, right? There's this season where you get a chance to see the gift in it. I know there are days we have this thing on Facebook where, I take my husband out and we go on these trips.
Right.
And there are days he makes me laugh, that I'm laughing. And I may have been just finished changing him out, just totally exhausted from what just happened. But these are now spaces where I get a chance to remember something that's lasting, right? Because he'll say something that triggers me or say something that, just causes me to crack up like that belly crack up, right? So let's talk about it because there are lasting seasons, things that we'll remember forever that will be gifts.
It's the cherished season. And I think what's special about that is all of it is honorable.
Yes.
Because some of it is, like you said, it's the belly laugh stuff, right? Those are those moments that last. They're the things that no matter what's going on, and I think particularly for those of us who may do end of life caregiving, we know that we're expecting something, right? We may be dealing with terminal illness, and both of us are walking that out. The care receiver is going through a lot in that process, and what that